parenting. Now, how does parenting fit into this? Well, your kids do have an effect on your life, and you have an effect on their life, right? You ever seen the bumper sticker? This is what the bumper sticker says. Insanity runs in the family. You get it from your kids. The Bible has a goal for marriage, and it's a goal that includes kids. If you look at Colossians 3:15, this is what it says. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also you are called in one body, and be ye thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts unto God. And whatsoever you do in word and deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. Listen to this now. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as it is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. So you see, there's a whole plan here, and you get the flavor of that plan. And we do everything in the way God has designed it and put it together, and then the entire family will fit together. When you're doing marriage and family counseling, how often do you think that the problems you're dealing with are going to have to do with the children? How about in blended families as an example? In blended families, there's almost a built-in fight. Well, they're your kids. No, they're my kids. No, who's going to take care of this? There's a lot to be worked on here, and today we're focusing on parenting and what do you do in counseling to help people in the areas of parenting. What is it that God is looking for? Let's go in the Bible and look at the principles of what the Bible says about parenting first, and then we'll put it together into the methods that we use. Psalms 103:13. Like as a father pitieth his children, so the Lord pitieth them that fear him. So what's the first principle? We're to have our children's best interest in mind. Now you might say, well, we all have that. Do your children perceive that you have their best interest in mind? That is the catch. That is the problem. Because if a kid doesn't feel you have their best interest in mind, what's the next thing out of their mouth? Therefore, I have to take care of myself. And how much are they going to obey you if they don't believe you have their best interest in mind? How about not at all? Because what are they going to do? They're going to make their own decisions. You say, do this. They're going to say, well, do I think that's in my best interest or not? If they don't think it is, they're not going to do it, right? So do you see how critical this first point is? Somehow you have to get the idea of unconditional love. Most kids think they have conditional love. If they perform enough, if they do right, if they please mom or they please dad, then mom or dad love them. But if they break the lamp, where do they get this idea from? You? When you get mad and yell and rant and rave and you do everything like your lamp is more important than them, what conclusion do they get? They're more interested in their lamp than they are in me. They don't have my best interest in mind. A little game we used to play with our kids, because we just realized. By the way, when did kids finally realize that their parents had their best interest in mind and they were loved? When they get their own kids.
That's right.
About the time they get their own kids, they have this different way of seeing things, but until then, they don't. So we used to play a game with our kids. This was the game. As we were driving them to soccer, we'd say, why are we taking you to soccer? And of course, they knew what the answer was. The answer is because we love you. So they'd say stuff like, because you like soccer, you like the coach, you want to see me win. They'd have, the idea was, they knew the answer was, and so every time we would say that, we were saying, you see, we are sacrificing for you, we're giving this for you, we're doing this all for you, wake up. Do you see that we unconditionally love you, that we're on your side? And that's the most important thing in parenting. Because if you don't do that, what's going to happen when your kids are teenagers? They're going to rebel. See, the best interest is another rudimentary definition of love, isn't it? That you need that love. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, this is Ephesians 6:4, and bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So we have a requirement. How many parents, though, provoke your children to wrath? Especially, how do you provoke your children to wrath? How about if they can't live up to your expectations? See, this is another biggie. One of the things I ask in all marriages and everything on the initial intake, were you able to live up to the expectations of your parent? You know how important that is and how powerful that is? Let me give you a fast story. It's a true story of a good friend of mine. And I ran into him, but this guy was cold as ice, never showed any emotion. He was a lieutenant in the Army, and I ran the Garden of the Gods race with him. The reason I know is because in my training we had to bring somebody to our pre-practicum that other people could counsel. We had to bring our guinea pigs in, and I talked him into doing that. And as soon as the other person counseled him, the instructor said in class, there's a man that's never been able to please his dad. And you would think it'd be good enough to be a lieutenant in the Army driving a tank. I think that's what he did. But it wasn't good enough. So he went from there to the Special Forces and became a Special Forces officer. Now wouldn't you think that'd be pretty impressive? But that wasn't good enough. So he got out of the Army and became an FBI agent. But he just couldn't be an FBI agent. Do you realize the only thing this guy wanted to do was jump out of airplanes and shoot automatic weapons? And the reason they liked him is because he would charge straight into a machine gun. He was the type of guy, when somebody's held up in the house and they're going to send somebody to come go in, and the only one's going to come out alive, they send him. Because he doesn't care if he lives or dies. All he cares is that he can please his dad. Became an undercover agent in San Francisco for 4 years until he started going paranoid. I'm not sure if he was going paranoid or they had so many people chasing him and trying to kill him that you're not sure which one you got. Last I heard, he was out of the FBI, in the Army, and the DMZ in Korea. What more can he do to please his dad? Do you see the problem? That's how dynamic this issue is. Ask me a question. Can your kids please you? What if you're a real perfectionist? Tremendous damage to kids. Psalms 127:4. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. What's it say? Hey, work with the arrow while it's still in the bow. It's a lot easier to point it where you want it to go while the arrow is still in the bow before the arrow is released from the bow. In other words, you've got 18 years. And you better get on it right now, because the younger the kid is, the more chance you have of aiming them in the direction that they need to go and make any impact in their life. There's so many parents that want to fix their kids after they're 18. a little bit funny because kids pick this up and they understand. My son came home, he's already, out of college and so on, and my wife started, trying to correct him in some things, and he said, "Mom, you had 18 years. You failed." Now I get to run my own life. And she wasn't being mean, but the point was, a lot more you can do while the arrow is still in the bow and you have it changed point. Proverbs 22:15. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. At what point and for what should you spank children? Obviously, the Bible says spanking is okay. Obviously, what? If you don't leave marks, if you don't overdo it, if you don't do it in anger. I'm suggesting it's primarily for rebellion and for very young kids. Because a young kid you can't talk to them, they can't, if you're sitting in a corner, you said a 1-year-old baby in a corner? Not going to work, right? Or a 3-year-old or something. And there are things there, but there are limits of what you can do. You still spank your kid when they're 6'5", 280 pounds, and 16 years old. No, you don't. There are certain different methods you can use as they grow, and we're going to see developmentally, there are certain things that are appropriate, and your role changes as a parent, depending on how old the kid gets. You see what I'm saying? Colossians 3:21. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. What's it saying? It's this whole thing about getting your approval. That kid desperately wants your approval. You are their God. The only God a kid knows is their mom or dad, and that's going to form their way of looking at God for the rest of their life until it gets changed. That's the initial way that they're going to look at things. It's going to make a big difference. I had this one experience, and I was in a seminar, and this lady came up to me and said, "You know what? My son is really struggling about God." And I sort of blew it off. Later, God said, "Well, you missed that one." So I went back to her and said, "Tell me about how he relates to his dad." Well, he could never do anything good enough for his dad. His dad's an absolute controller. See what's going on? See, that kid desperately needed his dad, and his dad was not there for him. And they did something I've never done before. The Holy Spirit told me to. It was a really heavy set will, and I said, "Why are you so heavy?" And because it's the only thing in my life that I can control. That's how dominant. The good news is that church went into a 21-day fast, and the husband was totally transformed. Amen. But had that continued, where was that going to go? Second Timothy 3:15. And that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise unto salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus. If you train up a child in the way he shall go, when he is old, he will not depart from it, right? Didn't say he's not going to have some problems in between, but you set that arrow. And what you do as a parent has long-term effects. And so as a small child, you need to start reading that kid about the Bible, teaching about God, and everything else as they grow up. Lamentations 3:27. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. What's it say? You need to set things up in a way that your family is a microcosm of the real world. In other words, that kid needs to learn how to labor, has a job and so on. As a small kid, you build them as you go. You see what I'm saying? And the more your family looks like the real world and operates like the real world, the more they're going to learn automatically in life as they go along. And so a kid should have an allowance. A kid should have jobs in the house. And as the kid gets more capable, more should be expected of them, right? Proverbs 23:6. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. Guess what else is critically important? Your example. Guess what? They learn a lot more from your example than they learn from all the stuff you say to them. Proverbs 23:19. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thy heart in the way. We do want to teach them. There's a time that you need to be talking to your kids, and a time that you need to help them to grow in what is going on. Now, why should you do that? Well, the first reason is you're going to get the results. Right? If no other reason. You don't really care about your kids, and I know you do. But you're going to get the results. Proverbs 15:20. A wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish man despises his mother. 17:25. A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her that beareth. Proverbs 29:17. Correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest, yea, and he shall be a delight unto thy soul. So you're making an investment that you're going to get. I have two couples right now that I'm counseling, that two of their kids have totally cut them off. There's no relationship whatsoever. Guess who's really going to end up holding the bag? The kids. And I'll actually tell them that. When a kid comes in, I'll say, let me explain something to you. I'm not really here for your parents. They're going to make it okay. I'm here for you. Because if you don't work on your relationship with your parents, if you don't work through this stuff through, who's going to end up holding the bag? When you're 18, who's going to get the consequences of what goes on in this family? You are. Proverbs 22:6, which are already quoted. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 4:10. Hear, O my son, and receive my saying, and the years of thy life shall be many. See, God wants your kid. It's the next generation. And you're the one that's molding it. You're the one that's going to make the difference based on what is going on in those different situations. Let's back off now and talk about development. Have you ever heard of a guy named Piaget? Okay, we're going to look at his developmental theory just a little bit because it'll help you understand. And what am I saying in development? I'm saying that basically the way you're going to deal with parenting is going to change as the child gets older. And if you don't change, you're going to fall into certain traps that are going to end up being a real problem for you in the future. Now, Piaget is Jean Piaget, very well known for his stages. First, we have the sensor-motor period, which is ages 0 from birth to 2.
What's that called?
That's sensory-motor period. Okay? And what are the real issues there? Love, attention, and timeout. That's basically how you deal with and spanking if necessary. That's how you deal with a 2-year-old. Now, some of the recent research has said some parents have made some major mistakes developmentally. And the major mistake you do developmentally is to not pay attention to your kids when they cry. Now, when they get to around 2-year-old, at some point you have to do that, but you see what I'm saying? When they're real young, this all has to do with attachment again. Because they learn their attachment style in this time period. And so if you're not safe for them, if you're not available for them, they will learn insecure attachment styles. And so they're learning a lot, and they're learning from what? Just whether you pick them up or you don't pick them up, whether you talk to them, whether you have eye contact. They go through a whole developmental type of thing of just getting excited and then not getting excited. That's development of emotions. So a lot of stuff takes place during this time period. And of course, we know a reaction attachment disorder. We know all sorts of major stuff that can go wrong during this time period. But it primarily doesn't go wrong because you don't discipline your kids. It goes wrong because you don't spend enough time with your kids, of holding them and being close to them and nurturing them as a very young child. So basically, what are we using here? It's called operant conditioning. What's operant conditioning? Operant conditioning says, if you do something and you get the result you want, you'll do it more often. It even works with kids this young. If I get a kid that comes in at 3 years old, who is running the entire family, and they do, what do I probably know? The parent doesn't understand operant conditioning. What they've been doing is later on, now not those early first year, okay, where we need to pick them up and meet those needs so they feel secure, but now what are they doing? When the kid is doing good, they don't pay attention to them. And when the kid is throwing temper tantrums, they pay attention to them. What are they doing? Yes, they're rewarding the temper tantrum. They're rewarding the bad behavior instead of the good behavior. And see, I always want to look at that and say, okay, what is being done here with these kids? Okay. Then we have pre-operational period, which is ages 2 to 7. And 2 to 7 was where the operant conditioning really comes in. It's reward and punishment. See, they don't have what's called formal thinking yet. When you ask a kid this age, and there are parents that do it all the time, why did you do that? What do they say? I don't know. And they don't know why they did that. Because they're not developed far enough. One thing that my wife and I would do is as our kids grew up, we would get one of the books from the library and said, what should a kid be like in these ages? So we didn't try and knock the kid out. You know? So we weren't taking things that were normal for those ages and trying to correct them and trying to fix them when they were simply developmental. In this case, the kid is totally turned on themselves. They really don't, they can start telling you a little bit of the whys, but they're not really there. They're totally egocentric at this particular time. But what really comes in is the next stage. It's called the concrete period of development, which is 7 to 11. And 7 to 11 is all blacks and whites. It's the law. We had the pre-operational that was 2 to 7. Now we have concrete, which is 7 to 11. Okay? They need consistent rules in the concrete period of development because everything is black and white. There are no grays. And what are they learning? They're learning the law. And they're learning if you do what the law says, you get positive. If you don't, you get negative. Fairness is really important during this stage. It's not fair because that's what they're learning, but this is part of the whole developmental process. But you understand, so far, we're what? Pretty much in control. The parent is doing what? The parenting is pretty much controlling what's going on in the family, right? Okay, now we're going to move into another stage. This is called formal operations. It's age 11 and higher. And the entire method needs to change. Now why? There are two major things you can do wrong. The first one is you can over-control them. What happens if you over-control a kid? What do I mean by over-control? You're not giving them choices or consequences in their life. You're just telling them, you will do it this way, it's my way or the highway. You yell at them, you scream at them. And by the way, if you get mad, the kids don't learn the lesson. That's the bottom line. All they remember is mom got mad or dad got mad. And so they don't learn the lesson of what's going on. I suggest at this point your role changes from being a parent to being coach. What's the difference between being a parent and being coach? For being a parent, if they can't tie their shoelaces, what do? You tie their shoelaces, right? You make sure they don't get out without a belt, right? In the next phase here, when we're talking about going into teenage, you need to let them learn, and you need to have what we'll call family rules here in a little bit. You need to have them making their choices and learning from their consequences. What do we learn when we do that? It's called self-discipline. See, in the early phase, what have we had? External discipline and the law, haven't we? See what I'm saying? Now, why do we need that? Because they don't have any self-discipline. And if you don't give them that, they will not have responsibility. But now we need to teach them self-discipline. Why do we need to teach them self-discipline? Because when they turn 18 and they're on their own, if all you've done is controlled them all of their life, what is going to happen? They're going to totally run amok. I had one young lady that turned 18, and she bounced $350 worth of checks. Those are just the check charges in the first month. Well, what did we know? She never had a checking account as a teenager. She never had an allowance. You know how she thought checking accounts worked? You simply call up the bank and ask them how much is in the account. And that's how much you can write. She didn't understand that it takes a while for the check to go through. See, she wasn't a mean kid. She wasn't trying to be bad. See, if you don't allow your kids to learn self-discipline, guess what? They're not going to have self-discipline when they grow up. Now, when we get into formal thinking, now they can see it from another person's point of view. Now they can really learn more than just, okay, I did this, it didn't work out for me, operant conditioning. Now rules like, here's your choice. You do this, and this is what's going to happen, work very well. And so that's what we do, that you set up those kind of things. Cause and effect. But like the coach, what are you going to have to let them do? Run the race. You can't get out there and run the race for them. You have to let them make the choices and learn from their consequences. And now you can talk verbally and they can understand, and you can help them understand life. And what we suggest in this, and now they can handle grades, not just blacks and whites. This is the time that you need to set up the microcosm of real life. What do I mean by that? Well, in real life, if you hit somebody after you're 18, what happens? You probably get arrested and go to jail. If you steal something, what happens? Yeah. So we had jail time for our kids. Yeah, for hitting people, for throwing things at people, for stealing, for lying, for cheating. Those were all jail time. They get to sit in our guest bathroom, bored out of their mind for a particular period of time. Now, what happens in real life if you commit the same crime twice? The sentence increases. So we had a little rule. You do the same thing twice, your time doubles. Do you think they did anything for very long? By the way, there's some other little rules, like the Bible says, if somebody steals something, you pay back 7 times. Right? But basically, we had our rules set up. They knew what the consequences were. And they knew they were going to happen 100% of the time. See, the catch is consistency. Even if the rules aren't very good, If you'll do them consistently, they will feel secure. See, what if I reach over here to the blackboard and I put my hand on it and the wall moves? How secure do you feel? Not very. In the same way in life, if they do this one day and they get this consequence, they do the same thing the next day, they get a whole different consequence, is that very secure? Is that the kind of life that you want to show them? That life is this random thing that you can't do anything about and you can't control and you have no choices because you never know what's going to happen to you. Is that the message you want to send your kids? If it's not, then you're going to have to come up with something different to deal with that particular thing. Another thing that's sort of interesting about this whole process of development is what's called equilibrium. And there's a process here, and if you understand this, it'll help you, that your kids go from disequilibrium to equilibrium to disequilibrium. In other words, here's what it says. Ages 2, 5, 10, and 16, they're pretty well adjusted. Ages 3, 7, and 13, they turn in on themselves. And ages 4, 8, and 14, there's rapid expansion. They're making major changes. I'll read those to you one more time. 2, 5, 10, and 16, they're fairly well adjusted. 3, 7, and 13, they turn in on themselves. And rapid expansion are 4, 8, and 14. But see, if you don't understand that, you think your kids are going bonkers about every other year. You don't understand that they're going through a developmental cycle, and it's sort of like this, of what's going on with them. Now, in counseling children, we're going to get this very rapidly in counseling children. Two different theories. It's actually fairly simplistic in counseling children. Normally, fix the parents. Okay? But the other part of it is that there are certain types of consistent things. Rudolf Dreikers suggests there are 4 problems in kids. He's a very well-known authority, as a secular authority. And the themes are power, revenge, attention, and inadequacy. Basically, when you're looking at a kid that's just in those earlier years, we're talking about the 4 to 7 now type of period. You see what I'm saying? But it also can be a little bit older than that. And you see this theme. You see that like they're in a power struggle with their parents. That's a standard theme. It shows they're not looking at life right. If your kid's in a power struggle with you, what's it saying? They don't believe you have their best interest in mind. They believe they're smarter than you are. They believe that they have the answers. And they're in a power struggle. What are they not realizing? You hold all of the answers. I remember one time my son got into a power struggle. He wasn't going to do anything we told him. So I sat him down and said, let me explain something to you, son. We're playing a game, and the name of the game is the parents win. Because I have all the chips, and you have none of them. And if you continue to fight me, then you're not going to get what you need in life, and you're the one who's going to be holding the bag. Now, I don't want to fight you. I have your best interest in mind. I'm on your side. I want to help you. But I can be your friend or your enemy. Which do you think would be most beneficial to you? So how about if we make a peace treaty here and get out of this power struggle so that we can both be on the same side again? Because if he fights me, he can stop a lot of what I can do for him, can't he? Revenge. You're not treating me right, I'm going to get you. Kids get into that. Attention, most usual one. They'll even do negative things to get your attention because they so desperately need you. Inadequacy, they just don't feel they can do anything. Where does the inadequacy one usually come from? They don't feel they can meet your expectations. So they basically drop out. Lee Carter in Kid Think gives you a number of other ones. He says there's the oppositional child, that's more like the power struggle. The sensitive child, the anxious child when it's fear, the depressed child, the self-centered child, and the deceitful child. So he says there's some other sort of patterns here. But the idea in the pattern says what to you? They're not perceiving life the way I perceive life. And I'm going to have to try and help them to see life differently, because if they consider this pattern, it's going to continue throughout their life if they don't get some help when they're young. So the answer is help them as soon as you can, as young as they have, when you start seeing these things happen. Okay, types of discipline or types of making this happen. We have several different stages depending on how far the kids are out of control when we get them. Here's an interesting quote. The Duke of Wellington was here in America, and this is what he said. The thing that most impressed me about America is the way the parents obey their children. What was he saying? He was noticing there were an awful lot of families that the parents were so concerned about their kids liking them that who was running the show. And that's another thing you're going to see with parents all the time. If the family is pretty much out of control, find out if the parent is feeling guilty that they didn't do an adequate job, or they're not an adequate parent, or they desperately want the approval of their kids. Because if they do, what's going to happen? The kids are going to take over. And guess what? In most families, you're always going to have one parent that is too soft and one parent that is too hard. So you're going to have to resolve that somewhat. Okay, so what are the things that we do? The first one is what I call having a family meeting or family rules. Now what is that? That's just basically boundaries. It's a set of boundaries. You end up doing it all the time. Some families I have to bring them into session, and we make these up actually in session. Others, they go home and have their family meeting. But this again is when we're getting into that, probably the best time to start this is around 4. Okay, on through. But the idea is what? We're going to have consistent rules in this family, and those consistent rules are going to have set consequences in this family, and we're all going to agree that these are fair. So what do? You call a family meeting and you say, guys, how do you like the chaos going on in our family? Do you like the fact that mom and dad yell and scream at you? Do you like the fact that we just arbitrarily make up whatever we want to punish you if you mess up? And what are the kids going to say?
No.
How would you like to have a situation in which the only rules we can enforce in this family are ones we all agree to? What are they going to say? Yeah. And so then you get them say, okay, what areas do we need? You know, is brother hitting sister? Do we need some time of when you go to bed? All of these kind of things that you set up. This whole set of rules and what the consequences are. And you let the kids suggest. Now, if you're in a family where one is known to be the disciplinarian and the other one is known to be the easy one, what I'll usually do now when we go to there is I'm going to assign the one that's the disciplinarian to be the lawyer for the kids. And the one that is normally the one who doesn't enforce the rules to be the one that's going to make sure that the consequences are sufficient. That's going to be the product. I'm going to flip it. Do you see what I'm saying? So that we can start working through this thing, because what do we want? We want balanced rules that they both agree and everybody in the family agrees is fair. So when something is violated, you simply say, go to the refrigerator and tell me what the rules we agreed on say. So now instead of the parent being the bad guy,
Your refrigerator is.
Yes, it's the rules, and you agree to them. And if you don't like them, you can't change them now that you violate them. You can, at the next family meeting, you can say this isn't fair, and we'll listen to you, and we'll talk about it, and determine what is fair. Another thing we do is that we tie these rules to their age. Another thing we do is we make sure there are as many positive rules as there are negative rules. You see what I'm saying? We're not trying, this is not some punishment. This is not the Gestapo. You are not in a prison camp. Because some kids feel that way. But what did I just set up here by this? How about our society? What do? We vote for people. They make laws. And what happens if you violate the laws? You get the consequences of the laws. But the idea is for this to be less, obviously you're not the same level of consequences. So therefore, what do? You pray that your kids make a lot of mistakes. Because when they do, they learn from little consequences, and they will never go to the bigger things of life. Do you see what I'm saying? If they learn not to steal when they're a little kid, they're not going to steal when they're older. They learn not to lie when they're a little kid, they're not going to lie when they're older, and so on. And so you have a chance to mold them and form them by the way you set up your family. But let's just say this family is totally out of control. I mean, they just fight the rules. And by the way, they're going to be. I used to call my kids slippery salamanders. Because they would figure out ways around the rules. And that was part of the game. Because in real life, that's part of the game. Right? There's certain things that are unreasonable, and you figure out how you're going to make life work with those things. Like I remember waking up one Saturday morning, and all the clocks in the house were off by now. Well, our rule for bedtime was, your bedtime is based on this particular clock to the second. We had no rule about setting the clocks in the house. It just says whatever that clock says. Well, and they weren't dumb enough to just change one clock because we might catch that. So they changed them all, and they got to stay up an extra hour later. See the idea? Does it sort of sound like contracts? You know, like you buy your house and stuff, you know? They don't cover this, it's not covered, right? You see the situation? But they're learning. See, they're learning about life, and they're learning about those rules. So we just laughed, and then we had a rule about setting clocks. But see, they're learning, and they're growing in that, and they're getting self-sufficient. You see, as they're going, they're understanding, they're making their choices. Sort of funny, another time, we were upstairs because we had upstairs and downstairs, we had a speaker system. And somehow they made a mistake and pressed it down and locked down. And we were up there and we were listening to their plan. They were getting together of how they were going to get around these rules. And we were out there listening to their negotiations, how they were teaming up to go and take on the parents. But hey, they were getting smart. Yeah, they were learning. They were growing. But you see, it wasn't this punitive situation. And we just laughed and had a good time about it. And see, you'll notice it'll also help you as parents on anger management. See, the reason you get angry and blow up is because you're putting up with stuff until it gets so big you explode, instead of handling it each time that it happens. You have to be perfect? No. But you do have to enforce it to a reasonable amount of time that they know it's going to happen, and then they'll follow through on that particular thing. Okay, well, let's say that doesn't happen. The next thing we go to, the next level up in discipline, is called Love and Logic. It's by Klein and Fay. And what it basically says is this, okay? Your kids are out of control. What are we going to do? Well, what we do is instead of trying to tell them what they're supposed to do, we simply tell them how we're going to live. And they're going to have to learn how to accommodate to the parents. And the idea of love and logic is what? Logic are the rules. Love is your unconditional love that you show to them, even if they violate the rules. Oh, I'm so sorry. I know you had a soccer game today, but you know what the rules are, and I can't change the rules. And if you did that, you're going to be in jail for 5 hours. And since the soccer game happens to be at the same time, I'm very sorry, but I can't do anything about it. I love you very much. I'd like to be at the soccer game and watch you play, but we agreed to those rules. I'm very, very sorry. They give a real classic example. And they have whole books of this. One half of the entire book on teenage parenting is just all these examples of how to do things. There was a set of kids, and these kids were going out and partying and so on. They were teenagers and not coming home when they're supposed to. What does the average parent do? Stays up late, concerned about them, and when they get home, they blow up, and you blow up at your kid, right? So this is the way they handle it. The kids come home late again, the dad goes and says, kids, I got a problem. You need to help me. I don't know when to file the missing persons report. I don't know when you've been injured or hurt or killed and I need to go out looking for you, or I need to call the police because you're laying in a gutter someplace. When is it? How late should it be for me to know that you're in danger and I need to do something here? And the kid said, probably if we're after legal curfew. So the dad said, see this alarm clock? When you leave for a party, I'm going to set that alarm clock to legal curfew. And if you get home before legal curfew, so you're not in trouble, you sneak into my room and you turn off the alarm clock so I don't have to wake up. But if that alarm clock goes off, I know you're in trouble, and I'm going to call all your friends' parents, and I'm going to call the police, and I'm going to go out looking for you. What do you think happened? The kids got very smart, or at least gave one of them home in time to get that alarm clock turned on. Another lady, see, what's the natural consequences? Another lady said, well, here's the deal. You know, in fact, she didn't tell them. By the way, love and logic, you don't tell them what the boundaries are. You let them learn by their experiences, since they don't want to have all these rules. You just let them learn the rules by themselves. Again, kid's not coming home from a party. But what do you? Well, if you were a mom, what would you do? Well, if you're really not concerned, you go to bed, right? So the mom puts her curlers in and puts on her bathrobe, and she goes to bed. But when the alarm clock goes off and they're not home, she gets up, and what would a mom do? Go looking for them, right? And find them at their party in her curlers and nightgown. Well, isn't that the natural consequence? Do you think they ever did that again? But do you see the idea? The idea of love and logic is, if you just think logically through what the consequences are and make sure the kids that get the consequences of their behaviors, it works. Well, let's say that doesn't work. By the way, that's from a book by Klein Fay called Parenting Teens with Love and Logic. Okay? But let's say that doesn't work. There's another level yet, higher than that we call structure. And you can be in a chaotic family where everything is not going right and is a real problem, and the kids are totally out of control. I mean, they're not going to do anything that the parents say, right? And by the way, this is what they use in mental hospitals, and this is what they use in detention centers, and this is what they use in hospitals where they're dealing with very kids. Like when we used to have charter here. This is what charter would do. When the kid arrives at charter, they put him in a room with nothing in it, and until he writes his entire life history and gives it to him, he has no privileges at all. See, before they have privileges, and you're taking them away. You see what I'm saying? Now we go where you have no privileges until you earn them. And it works very good. As an example, at a family, husband is away in the military, the kids are running amok, and she just is so harried that she can't seem to follow through on the rules and that kind of stuff. So, how do we handle it? Well, when you go home, pull the cords of all the TVs and all the computers in the house and lock them up. Explain to the kids that they can earn the right to watch TV or to play on the computer by doing their homework, by cleaning their rooms, and doing their chores. And when they get those things done, then they can come to you and you will inspect them, and then you will issue them a cord for the TV set or a cord for their computer. And if they don't do it, guess what? They don't get it. So do you see how you have now, we've turned the whole situation around, that the parent is now in total control of everything. And the parent isn't chasing them around trying to keep them from doing things. Now they're in the other end of it, and they're the one that has to perform, they're the one that has to do the things to get the privileges to work in their life. And that's the most powerful thing. There are a few other things like that that people use. Sometimes they're like outward bound programs. Sometimes kids have to be put on ranches and so on. Or you have military schools and so on, which are disciplinary. But basically all they are is the same thing. You know, just other ways of doing discipline. But those are sort of the three levels that we use in helping parents and families get things under control. But what happens when the kid turns 18? Now what do we do? Well, in our society, this is what I suggest you do. You go to your kid and you say, congratulations. You are an adult. You have made it. You can do absolutely anything you want. And by the way, since you're really not established in life yet, and teenage really goes to about age 25 today, you can choose whatever you want to do. I want to let you know that there are a lot of apartment complexes here in town. And you can live in any apartment complex you want to. And I want to let you know that all of those apartment complexes have contracts. That means there are certain requirements that you have to perform in order to have a place to live. And I want to let you know that we also have an apartment complex. And we think we offer a very good deal in our apartment complex. But let me tell you what the rules are. Because automatically you're going to have a fight between the parents and the 18-year-old, because the 18-year-old believes that they are grown up and they have a right to do whatever they want to, and the parents believe that if you're living in their house, that they have a right to tell you what to do. And so what do? You make a contract and negotiate a contract. And the kid can choose to take this or not to take that contract. And if they choose not to take the contract, what can they do? Go out and get a job and find themselves an apartment and move out on their own. But of course, you also, in your contract, have to have certain things. Like, when are they getting evicted? If they don't pay, whether it's money or whether it's chores, that is what they're paying. What if you don't pay for your apartment? What if you damage your apartment? How about damage deposits? What if you wake up all the neighbors in your apartment? There are consequences built into that contract, aren't there? And so, once they're 18, what control do you have over your kids? Only what you provide based on their contract with that kid. As an example with our kids, okay? We went to them, and when they graduated from school, we said this. congratulations. You were the first recipients of the Reiner Scholarship. Now, first was my son who said that. My daughter, you're the first female recipient of the Reiner Scholarship. And we just want to let you know that this is what our scholarship offers. We realize there are a lot of other scholarships out there, and you can take any scholarship you want. You go to any school that you want to go to. Our scholarship happens to be a Christian scholarship, by the way, and therefore we have certain requirements. One, like other scholarships, you have to maintain at least a 3.0 in school for this scholarship to continue. Because obviously we don't want them just to go out and blow it, right? Second thing is, because this is a Christian scholarship, you're required to attend church at least one time a week to maintain your scholarship. Now, we will also provide you, as long as you maintain your scholarship, we will provide you with maintenance on your vehicle. We will provide you with insurance on your car. But if you get in an accident or if you get a violation, you will have to pay the difference. And we will also provide you a cell phone, and we will provide you for this number of years. And now you can choose whether you want to accept this scholarship or not. And so they got to accept, so they chose. But again, we couldn't control, and we didn't control what school they went to. My son had 3 scholarships he turned down. But we had to let him make his own life. Now, why do you need to do this? Because if a kid turns 18, and you try to control them, and you try to hold on to them, and try to make their decisions for them, you're going to lose any control you have. In fact, the more you try to control them, the more you're going to lose control and have any influence in their life. So the opposite is a lot better. See, when our kids call, we say, we don't make any decisions for you. You're grown up. Now, if you want us to talk through your options, we're willing to talk through your options, but we're never going to make a decision for you. So guess what? They call and get our advice because they know we're not going to strong-arm them, we're not going to change them, we know they're making their decisions, and they're going to get their consequences, which they learned as they were growing up. So do you see, if you want to have any control over your kids, or any influence in your kid's life, you get it by giving up all influence over your kid's life. So you're getting the idea of how this fits together. So you understand, you change from being a parent to being a coach to being a consultant. See, we are now consultants. If they need input, if they need things, they can come, they can ask us. But we don't make their decisions. And we won't tell them what way they need to go, because they need to go to God and they need to learn from God and hear from God what God is telling them to do in their life. If they want our input, we'll give it to them, but we will not make their decisions for them. So what are the building blocks of our successful parenting? Let's just go down the list here. I'm going to close with this. Stay in touch. You need to have that contact. You can't be this parent that is gone all the time and think that this thing is going to work. This is a team effort to build a kid and launch him into the world, isn't it? And it's going to take work. Understand the need to talk and listen. And I'm going to underline listen. How many kids feel their parents don't listen because the parents have all the answers? And therefore, what do the kids do? They don't tell you. It's the same way. The more you control them, the more you over-control them, the less they're going to come to you for advice, the less they're going to listen to you. Communicate and balance rules and boundaries. Make sure you have clear rules for your family and clear boundaries for your family. And use them to the extent you can. No parent's going to be perfect. Be consistent in enforcing discipline. Remember, it's discipline, it's not punishment. See, punishment is what? When you go beyond what they need to correct the problem. Now, your job is only to correct the problem. Don't discipline in anger or guilt. Always in love. What's the main thing you have to get across to your kids? We love you unconditionally just the way you are. We have unmerited favor for you. You are our favorite kids. You have a special place in our life, and we will always be here for you. We are your safe base of operation. We are your resource. We are your ability to make it here in life, and we're going to do everything we can to help you.